Hi, my name is Fan Alcon again. I'm from basically helping Dr. Ramos on this interview. So we should get started. Let me
Yes.
ask you an overview question first. So could you tell us like a little bit more about your jobs as a facilitator of innovation in the corporation?
Thank you. I jumped into that world in the mid 90s after 14 years in the manufacturing sector. And we had gone through that, introducing creative thinking and innovative thinking into our processes and our ways of doing things. So I wanted to just give forward and help other organizations uh, benefit from the same insights that we had uh, gotten by opening our doors to outside help. Um, Also, I wanted to work on the upstream, which is basically where it's easier to come in. It's very hard to come in at the innovation stage. You have to have creative thinking before you have innovation. And here, especially in Quebec, it's easier to come in early, come in to help clarify the problem, come in and help structure and facilitate workshops for ideations. And there's less of a tendency to ask consultants to stay for the innovation stage. So what I do most is coming in upstream. And in about 20% of the time, we get asked by the client, whether we've gone back or we're still in, we get asked to stay and move forward with the innovation, taking one of those top ideas and bringing them to fruition in the organization. When this happens, I also ask to be in charge of the change because innovating is all about changing. It's all about moving from current ways of doing things to new ways of doing things. And often enough, the innovation itself is not that hard to implement. The big challenge is often is convincing people that there's benefits and value for everyone in adapting the way we do things and what we do. So that's pretty much what I do in 70% of the time. The rest of my job is doing the other part. I do strategic consulting and I do some advisory. So they are all very interconnected.
Thank you for that detailed answer. And also, I noticed that you purposefully um, divided the concept of creative thinking and innovation. Could you tell me a little bit more about that?
I think they come. You could innovate by copying and pasting what others do. So that would be innovation for you. It wouldn't be market innovation. It wouldn't be an industry innovation. But I think real innovation, the type that we like, the one that we saw Steve Jobs do, is really, going back to the basics, figuring out what we could improve, what could we change, what could we do better, and then having the guts to actually making that change happen. And for me, that's where the creative thinking happens. And as Teresa Amabile at Harvard likes to say, creativity is everybody's responsibility. Innovation is unfortunately too often the responsibility of a limited few decision makers. And so in that sense, you can have 100 good ideas, you may implement one, or you may often implement none because the organization is not ready or willing or able to move forward. So I think we need to differentiate these stages, which does not mean that when you're actually implementing the innovation, you stop your creative thinking, because you'll have to have very creative thinking ways of convincing people to overcome their fears of change. And you may have to be creative in how you're going to move forward with a new product without cannibalizing other products. And so they are different in a linear process from going from a problem to an innovation. But creative thinking for me is something you use every day, whether you realize it or not.
Mm. That's a really interesting insight that I just gained. So one of the recurrent themes that I hear based on your answers is this openness. Would you say that openness is one of those characteristic, or is there any other characteristic that you might find in this high performing team?
I think the first thing you have to be is open. if you're not open, as soon as someone says, "Why are we doing it this way?" you'll brush them off, you'll fire them or whatever. As soon as one of your colleagues asks a question, you go into a dispute instead of looking at the value of the question. So I think this openness is a must. It's also openness to diversity in the DEI way that we understand today, but also in different backgrounds, different perspectives. I went in countries where I didn't speak the language. I've worked with people whose skill I did not understand, but we formed a great team because we sought the complementarity instead of saying, "Oh no, I'll have to adjust because he doesn't do it the same way as I do." So, is the glass half full? Is the glass half empty? So for me, openness is key to the question. If you're open to the questions, you should more often than none be open to the questions or to the discussion that will follow if you happen to temporarily agree to disagree. And I think for me, that goes with definitions we associate today with the humble leader. So humility for me would be another key trait in those organizations, and courage to say we and not I, courage to be humble, courage to seek out people that are different and move forward, in unknown, because creating and innovating is always working in the unknown. It takes a lot more courage than managing humdrum or operations. If the other one I would ask is that if you have that often enough, you find teams with very little or limited ego. So ego, as we know from Patrick Lencioni, when ego gets in the way, you remain a pseudo team. You never really get to be a real team. So that's how I would connect these concepts.
Thank you for that answer. So let's move on to the next one. What is the methodology that you would use to bring creative thinking to the companies?
That's a great question. By methodology, are you thinking my personal approach? Are you looking at a process like CPS or design thinking? Where do you want me to go with this?
So it's I'm more interested in the process, like the general process, because I have no idea regarding how that's going to work on a corporate level, and I would love to learn about that from you.
Okay, honestly, the first question I ask, or one of the first questions I ask in the first 30 minutes of a first meeting with a client is, which processes do you use? So if they are committed to design thinking, we'll play with design thinking. If they are committed to using ThinkX, we'll use ThinkX. If they're more comfortable with Synectics or any other process, basically, if you try to convince people to do something they're not comfortable doing, and you impose on top of that a process they are not familiar with, you're really piling up the chances for failure. So I would rather work with a process that is not necessarily my preference, and I will tweak it my way. And I will often tell them, well, I'm gonna cheat a little. I'm gonna use that stage of your process in a different way, so I can introduce a tool or an angle that is a bit different. So I'm most comfortable, and my preferred process would be CPS, but it's such a generic process that I've mapped it over probably half a dozen processes. And then this way, I know where I am within CPS. I know where I am compared to their frame of reference, whatever their process is, and I'll go along with their process. I think that's the safest way for me to work. And then I'll throw in my tools, my techniques, my energizers, my team building activities. But at least it's as if, I had to teach in a language I don't know in a foreign country. They allow me to teach in my language. They bring in a translator. So they make it easy for me. They make it easy for the students. So I try to do the same when I come in as a facilitator.
Thank you. And since we're on the topic of methodology, is there any certain strategy that or some sort of tools that we use to ensure that some of those creative ideas or just ideas get carried out?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I wish I was Harry Potter. That would make that would make the answer easier. I think and it connects with your previous question. What I've learned over the years, when I sense a commitment from senior management to introduce a culture where creativity is looked upon and we strive for innovation, we're going to start with non-threatening, non-mission critical challenges, as simple as, the end of year celebration or the summer picnic of all employees. It sounds stupid, but this is the easiest place where people will be willing to accept those wild, crazy, unusual ideas that we seek, that in them have the root of something that might have a lot of potential. So for me, that's been what I've preferred over the years. Let's not start with, how can we become number two or we die within 2 years. We'll try to, create an environment where people will practice the guidelines for divergent thinking, the guidelines for convergent thinking. They'll practice ideating and throwing out or listening to wild, crazy, at first glance, impossible ideas, and tame those crazy ideas into something manageable. Once you've proven that this can be done, even on a simplistic but corporate relevant problem, then it's easier for them to sort of be more open to similar crazy idea for something that may be mission critical. If you go from, you smoke 3 packs a day to stopping cold turkey, it's going to be very hard. So for me, I reverse that and I go with gradual comfort development into a new model, a new process, which includes listening to crazy ideas, taming those, coming up with something relevant, and also making the pitch. So the outcome of the creative process actually survives the vetting process from those decision makers that make or break the most promising idea and allow it to become an innovation or just dismiss it at the first glance. So it's not an easy environment. I try to take it my way, and I would say that my answer fits well with our culture here. I have found areas in the world, countries or corporations, where this would not work. There are cultures and organizations who seek someone who's much more cutthroat minded, and no, you have to come in and scare the shit out of them. May not be the best idea. I may not agree with it, but if that's the preferred way, I would go there. But it wouldn't be what I would teach in class or what I would invite my apprentices to use as their approach in our North American segment, which is Quebec, Ontario, Northern US.
So sounds like you have been working in one of these company that with the street boss. So have you coming to any obstacle with that kind of bosses?
Yes, definitely. I've done workshops with friends where after 5 minutes, the most senior person in the group started blasting most of the people that were in the room about projects that they had worked on, and he had heard something or received an email a week ago, and now he decided to just blast them in public or present the workshop in a totally different angle than what we had announced. So this will happen, and I think part of the learning ropes of a facilitator is having someone whom you trust to learn, to know you can rely upon him or her to get up and manage that with that senior executive. And you learn how it's done. You learn how not to do it, because even the most seasoned of us will not win every time. Sometimes we just have to deal with a frustrated customer or a non-receptive environment. But definitely it happens. I've heard people do skeet shooting, like you see, some people will ask, they see a good idea fly by and they're targeting it and they're shooting at it. I've seen that kind of environment. I've seen environments where the managers come back at 4:30 and they dismiss the whole day as a waste of time. And then you have to go to their readiness level. Then you have to close the workshop, get to their readiness level, listen to their concerns, listen to their frustration, and rebuild your pitch of what might have been the best idea that they just brushed off. Rebuild that, but at their level of acceptance. And so you may have trained your participants who were in the workshop. They may have been involved in previous workshops before, so they know about all the craziness and the fuzziness that comes with the process. Maybe that manager doesn't. So you have to take them by the hand and hopefully bring them to drink the water or drink the Kool-Aid, whatever the best expression is in your area. It's not always successful, but it's part of any change process, which means that I've seen people act the same when we wanted to introduce ISO in a company, or when another organization wanted to have Lean Six Sigma and black belts. And so the same kind of resistance to change reaction will come out, whatever form of innovation you're trying to bring forward.
This really reminds me of one of my previous job at the clinics, in which I was proposing the idea of using email instead of fax, because the fax version doesn't work at like all the time. So it's kind of just like how you describe it. It's really hard to make change on.
Yes.
When they're stubborn.
You're changing someone else's innovation. I think that's one message I've learned the hard way, but I think is important, is whatever you're coming in to improve upon, there's probably someone in the room who was there when that was implemented. And I started in IT, and I remember when we were asked to change the payroll system, the EVP of HR was the one who had implemented that payroll system. And so he's looking at you with, a kind of not so rosy glasses. He's wondering why, because it's still paying people on time. But he's built blinders on his own baby, and your child is always the best. So it's easy for them to dismiss that their child has to leave the nest and has to be replaced by something else.
Okay. So yeah, let's move on to the next question. What is the unique value that you bring to the company as a facilitator?
I don't like the word expert, and I don't really like to say, well, what unique value do I bring? But I think what I bring first and foremost, I was in corporate world in different levels of management for 14 years. So whenever I approach people, I know what they went through. I was in charge of processes, and then we hired consultants, and we had an ideation workshop, and we had new processes, and I had to deal with it and accept it. And I got to see the benefit of it. So I drank the Kool-Aid, and in fact, I loved it so much, I made a career out of it. So I think that's probably something that I bring. I've worked in SMBs and in very large corporations. I worked for public and for private organizations. So, which is also a trait that most consultants have. So I have seen enough of different contexts that I can say yes or I can say, I'm sorry, I disagree, because it's been done elsewhere. I have enough references and if I don't know, I'll go and seek out, comparatives or examples where whatever we're thinking of was actually successfully done in the past. I've also gone back as a beginner when I left, my job in a manager of IT to become a junior consultant and a junior facilitator. So I think I know what they're going to go through if we introduce Lean Six Sigma, and they have to go through all of the belts before they're a black belt, and they can be cocky again or whatever. So I think that helps the communication. It's not an instant win. It's not an instant, oh yeah, okay, so we believe you, but it gives me enough credibility, and it allows me to build a discussion around the benefits, because I've seen organizations who did it. I've helped organizations who have done it. And I have worked with organizations that didn't do it, and for which right now all that's left is the facade of the former building. We still have a building in Montreal that has the word Sears on it. Unfortunately, Sears no longer exists, nor does Eaton, though we still have a Eaton Center. So companies that changed for a long time, and then it came the 90s and early 2000s, stopped changing to the point that they're no longer there. So that's my way. Is it the better way? That's what has been successful for me, is leveraging the fact that I'd gone through similar changes, so I could relate to them, and I could relate to, and the fact that I often use that metaphor as we're changing someone else's innovation, I think for me wins me enough listening time that I can continue with I'll call it my sales pitch.
Yeah, I love that. So one thing that I grabbed from that conversation is that basically you realize your past experience, I think, seeing these examples and seeing these past events as your on the big sales page.
Yeah.
Would you say that would be also the same, like it would be the same thing that you bring to the company as a trainer instead of a facilitator?
In a certain point, yes. After 14, I didn't do an MBA after 3 or 4 years. I did an MBA after 14 years. So I went back to, I went back to school after 14 years, and I was just one of, 50 that were doing an MBA that year. So I think, yeah, that's where the analogy works. I think what I bring is I've taught in SMBs, I've taught in mid-size, and I've taught in large organizations other topics than creativity. So I was a trainer in project management. I was a trainer in change management for other organizations. So that helps. I've taught other topics. I've taught on the undergrad level. I've taught in 5 undergrad programs and 5 graduate studies programs for 3 different universities. So I also think it brings me enough examples of executives that I've trained in MBAs or MS programs that were going through the learning process. So I know what it is to learn after a certain time, and I know what it is that helps them learn. I don't have a magic wand, but at least I know that if I don't succeed with explanation A, I always have a storyline B and a script 3 that I can use, so that, I can hopefully make sure that they anchor to one concept or one buzzword. And that's why, just as I've done today, if I find something helpful, and it's a student 15 years ago who told me that this, in a change management course, this idea of we're changing someone else's innovation was a wow for him, man. I'd been saying it for a while, but I didn't realize how helpful it was. So I started using it, but purposefully repeating it. And so I've developed for each subject matter that I teach, various expressions or useful examples of, what it is to be here and what it is, if you can master where we're discussing, to be here. But there's a road ahead, and learning is not linear, but because I've had creative thinking, I know that failure is a good way to learn. So that's why I also try to provide an environment in class where it's okay to fail. Whether we use case studies, whether we have guests and we ask a question that maybe the guest would normally shun upon, I say, no, ask your question differently. What is it that I'm trying to have them rephrase their question if the answer is not right to them, instead of saying, well, he did not answer my question. So, but did you ask what you really wanted? Just as we train people in CPS, making sure that we have the right problem. So that would be my way.
Yeah, thank you. And here we come upon the last question. If you were to give advice, what advice would you give to a professional who wants to be enhancing their team creativity?
Their own, I would say, start with improving your own. lead by example. So I practice for years while I was doing my train the trainer program in the US. I would do volunteer work with Boy Scouts, with, hockey teams, whomever, not for profit needed help. I would come in and facilitate, but that's after my first 2 or 3 years of practicing. So I know what I mean by when I talk about divergent thinking, and I know what it is to be asked to generate 20 ideas in 20 minutes, because I've done double that. So I know it can be done. So I think first key, if you want to be credible with your team, be able to do it to a certain degree, and then welcome your employee that does it better than you, or your teammate that does it better than you. And if the student passes the teacher, then give them the marker and let them facilitate. But for sure, I cannot ask people to believe in creative thinking, solving a not so easy corporate problem, if I've not been part of a team, I've not learned the ropes, and I cannot lead by example. And so I think for me, that's the first key. After that, find yourself multiple teams that are efficient. They don't all have to be at work, but you can be on an employee. We had an employee committee in the manufacturing team I was on. So I joined that. I joined the departmental small team that managed the monthly anniversaries and then the annual festivities during the holidays. And so every time I got a chance to facilitate, every time I got a chance to show my stuff, and every time I got the chance to at least run away or listen to the feedback. So I listened to the feedback, and then I got better and better and better. I still have ways to go, but I think that's where you be comfortable with your own creativity. Sometimes you'll hit a wall. Be okay with admitting that, and then you can have the humility. Then you can have the openness to questions. Then you can have the courage to move forward that we mentioned earlier. But if people look at you and they don't see that in you, why would they believe that this is the way to go? Worse, if you're role modeling something that seems like the opposite, it doesn't make sense. And this is true whether we're talking about creativity or whether we're talking about any other stuff. It's true now for those who prone ChatGPT or AI versus. So, those recipes, we're talking today about creativity and innovation, but the same paradigms, the same hurdles, the same challenges will arise, whatever innovation you're trying to move forward.
It's really insightful. I actually learned a lot from one takeaway for me here is definitely innovation is kind of like different from the creativity, and also like innovations. It's someone's when you innovate is how do you say that sentence again? Innovation is
what you're trying to change is someone else's innovation from the past, and they're still and maybe the team you're asked to work with was that person's team, and so it's now all their baby. He's the father, and they're the uncles and aunts, and you're asking all of them to change that child from speaking English to learning a new language. Some of them will say, yes, great idea. Some of them will say, it's too early. He still doesn't master the first language. So this is innovative. You're changing, unless you're introducing worldwide novelty, something that never existed before. But if you're doing corporate innovation, you're improving a product, you're improving a process. It existed before. Someone else put it in place. Think of those people. So when you criticize that process, when you phrase your problem, don't phrase your problem in a way that seems to target those who created that innovation 5, 10, 15 years ago. You'll have less resistance to fight with as you move forward with whatever replacement or alternative you come up with.
That's the level of emotional intelligence I needed.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you.
Other questions?
I think that's all the question we have for today. And really, thank you for the insightful interview for this one. I
Well,
learned a lot.
thank you for inviting me and having me on your list. And send me a copy of the other ones. I'd love to listen to the other podcasts that will come out of this.
Yes, I will. I will notify Dr. Ramos for that.